utilities you're carrying out as we speak. What additional incremental or maybe replacement needs are we seeing on the bulk system? And so that's something that we don't have necessarily hard data for at the moment, but there is some signals we've seen throughout the EPPAC data, especially in the stage 1 capacity expansion modeling results, that have shown certain areas of the state, especially downstate New York, that may benefit from additional bulk transmission capability into downstate New York. So that's kind of where we're at today, just knowing there might be this kind of a signal that bulk solutions might be necessary. There might be some interesting things to look at there. But importantly, the CGPP order also said that, as we go through this evaluation of trying to figure out where there might be some unique bulk solutions, that we bring this information to stakeholders through the EPPAC and see what EPPAC members think about the results we've seen in stage 1. What type of issues that you're seeing in the modeling results and through other modeling frameworks that you might be familiar with, what types of bulk solutions we might want to evaluate, or what type of issues we might want to look into resolving with bulk solutions, so that we can take that information and remember from the initial kind of scope of work, that initial flow diagram we showed, how there's this kind of secondary process outside of what the utilities are doing right now, where DPS and NYSERDA are engaging a consultant to help with this phase. So we're coming to the EPPAC now to kind of get that information about what type of solutions might be interesting to look at, what type of issues you think are arising in the modeling, so that we can evaluate which ones of those have to move forward through kind of a bulk solutions analysis, so that by the time we get to stage 5 in the CGPP, where we have kind of a full set of local solutions that the utilities have seen from translating the capacity expansion model through their local models. So we have all that information, but we will also have a view of potential high value bulk solutions as well. And we can use stage 5 of the CGPP to really evaluate the combinations or replacements of those projects to come up with the least cost portfolio under our different scenarios for putting in that report to the commission. So that's kind of where we are today. Just a little bit more background before we kind of jump into the discussion and answer any initial questions. In anticipation of this type of meeting, and knowing that the answer was probably not going to be nothing to look at, DPS and I sort of have engaged a consultant to support this analysis, whatever comes out of this meeting. We've also had a little bit of time to, just as you all have, to evaluate the stage 1 results, to kind of talk amongst ourselves about what types of interesting issues we might be seeing. We want to take this initial step to take your feedback right now on what you're seeing, so we can take that to the consultant and have them do some analysis. And that's the type of analysis that we will bring back to an EPPAC meeting also in future time. And that's the information that will be then reviewed and commented on and revised for inclusion into the stage 5 work in the CGPP. If we don't have time to get through everybody's questions, or if there's remaining questions after this meeting, we can have another window, maybe a week or two, to also have written comments sit in on this. But we are kind of under a time crunch to make sure we have enough time to both get the information, but also move through additional modeling in advance of the stage 5 work that's going to have to happen. So we can't have an unlimited amount of meetings on this topic. We're trying to have at least these 2 hours today, maybe a week or two of additional back and forth through written comments, and then kind of be on our way before bringing back interim and final results from the consultant work there. Is there any questions on everything I laid out yet before we jump into the actual nitty-gritty details?
Skylar, in the chat, someone asked if you're able to share who the consultant is.
Oh, not quite yet. We will very soon. But we do have a consultant prepared to take on any scope that we're looking into on these types of bulk solutions. Okay. So just to kind of start the conversation and get people thinking about the types of things we might be seeing and the types of evaluations that we might want to have a consultant run. Just from my personal perspective, one of the most interesting results that I think we saw in this analysis was actually in sensitivity 7, where we removed um, hydrogen, removed all DFERs from downstate New York, and to see what would happen. And I think the results that the NISO showed was that the model really didn't fully solve. The solution was kind of failure to meet the energy demands, and it wasn't by a little bit. It was by somewhere around 7,000 megawatts. When we think about what the solution to that is, if we are constrained with firm resources downstate, really the only solution is additional transfer capability into downstate New York. And so when we go back and look at the 3 primary scenarios that are proceeding through the additional stages of the CGPP, a really interesting result comes out. The reliance on hydrogen-based resources, storage in huge quantities downstate, and a lot of offshore wind, that's fairly consistent among all the main scenarios. And so if there is potentially risk in offshore wind timing, in the magnitude of energy storage we might be able to put inside of New York City, or in the capability of hydrogen to show up in the 5 to 10 gigawatt range, there might be some value in evaluating, expandability of bulk transmission into downstate New York, and any number of ways, through existing interfaces, through new interfaces. That might be something to look at to help get ahead of some of those problems, make those problems easier, or minimize the risk of any one of those technologies not arriving in the magnitudes that we're hoping. And so one of the first things I would probably want to suggest in terms of looking at additional bulk interfaces or bulk solutions is, what are the capabilities of increasing um, bulk transfer capability into downstate New York, specifically into Zone J. I think this is where a lot of the constraints are with the LCR especially. So just thinking about those types of things for the reasons I mentioned, I think would be a really interesting thing to scope out. Is there anybody that agrees with that take?
Yes, Skylar, Bill Acker here. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, Kaida, this is Shraddha from Next Era. I agree with that. We definitely support that. Thank you.
Skylar, this is Anna Summer from Energy Futures Group. I have a clarification question about that. I can't remember the exact number of resources that were added to Zone J. I think it was something on the order of 20 gigawatts. Do you view increasing that transfer capability as a partial solution in amongst a number of packages that a number of mitigations that need to be taken to integrate those 20 gigawatts worth of resources, or do you view this as more a question of which mitigations the state should prioritize, or is it both?
No, that's a great question. I think you're getting right to the heart of it. I think it has to be a little bit of everything, because one of the things I don't think we even know yet is what is the kind of maximum feasibility of increasing, like what's the maximum extent that we can actually extend or increase the capability upstate to downstate New York in the next 10 or 15 years. I don't think we can necessarily add enough. And operationally, I'm not even sure that would be the best idea to add enough to completely remove the need for any resources downstate. Because like you said, we're seeing huge quantities, on the orders of 20 to 25 gigawatts of resources installed downstate. That's not their capacity value. The capacity value is probably a bit lower in the 10 to 15 range, but still trying to replace that full 10 to 15 with just transmission from new generation upstate would probably be difficult. So there's probably some combination. And like I said before at the beginning, we don't have the model set up right now to have run those types of sensitivities to like do the comparison between bulk interface expansion versus generation expansion. So anything we do now will have to be kind of an out of model kind of revision of that work. But what I'm most interested in doing right now is exploring those types of feasibility questions. You know, what are the pathways to expand upstate to downstate transmission? How much do they cost per unit? What's the trajectory? Do they stay that cost per unit for a few projects, or does every project get more expensive? Is there a maximum amount you could possibly do? And what is that threshold? Because if we find out that the maximum expandability, the most you could ever add upstate to downstate is 3,000 megawatts.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting and important finding that kind of puts a really important constraint on generation in downstate New York. So those are the types of questions I'm looking to answer.
Yeah, I think I agree that those are all super interesting questions, and I would add a couple more to that, and I will quickly reveal that I am not a transmission planner. But I think the other question is how do supply chain and cost considerations influence those options too, especially if really what the commission is going to have to decide is which projects to endorse in, let's say, the next 5 years. Like, should we be prioritizing something that we can get, like, let's say maybe advanced conductors, instead of something that requires transformers because we can't buy transformers? I think that would be really an interesting question to consider, is how do those sorts of supply chain considerations impact the projects that the commission ultimately decides are in the public interest.
Hey, it's Liz. I mean, supply chain impacts, have to be looked at. I think that they certainly factor into individual project development and timing. I don't think we're looking at transmission projects that can be built in the next 5 years. I think that the likely horizon is something a bit longer than that. And just to put it in context, I think what from a high 50,000 foot perspective, what I think the commission is hoping to get out of this exercise is some indications of, where that balance in favor of a bulk solution, given the horizon that we have, where the balance might tip, as I said, in favor of the bulk solution. So looking for indications, not, specific project proposals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate that clarification.
Skylar, Bill Acker again, another question.
Sure, Bill.
So it's built a little bit on Anna's question, but just in thinking about this, I mean, one of the things that you discussed trying to do over the next little while as we go into the next round of the CGPP is to improve our modeling for things like long duration storage and for energy storage in general. The idea that we, have to start the batteries at 0 state of charge and then end at 0 each day. As you're well aware, there's lots of potential synergies between the bulk transmission and putting storage on. Not just storage as transmission, but kind of the synergy of the two together. I'm wondering about, is this exercise going to be independent of that other and more advanced modeling that you're thinking about doing, or is there a way to have that converge going forward? Because I worry a little bit that looking at each dimension of this very complex problem, one dimension at a time, may miss the really big synergies that we can get because I personally firmly believe we're going to need more bulk transmission to Zone J, and I also think we need to optimize that with both long duration storage and intraday storage as we're putting it together, and where that storage gets which side of the transmission or both, and all those things are things that need to be kind of considered as we're looking at the bulk transmission projects. So wanted to get your thoughts on that.
That is a great point. I know in the joint utilities evaluation that they're doing, there's a ton of storage everywhere, and so there's going to be some synergies there that it's just going to fall out of their analysis. They're also required to take a look at grid enhancing technologies for any of the solutions that they think they might develop. So I think on the local side, we're on a good pathway to start finding some of that value. But like you just mentioned, on the bulk transmission side of things, we don't have any modeling right now, and we're probably not going to be able to run any additional, say, capacity expansion modeling or production cost modeling right now looking at different ways of modeling storage or long duration storage or mitigating bulk needs right now. The only thing we're really able to use is whatever existing modeling we got through stage 1, and anything else that might be, you know, interesting or relevant from any other proceedings. So we're kind of stuck in terms of new data or finding out like new information. But we could look at, you know, as we're moving through and identifying, like just like I said, you know, maybe we need more upstate to downstate transmission, and we're scoping things with a consultant. We might be able to, you know, scope a way of at least, you know, examining the value of additional storage or long duration storage in those discussions. But I don't want to commit to anything because that's kind of a difficult thing to scope, and also we already have so much storage on the system in these analysis that I'm not sure how, you know, how it's going to be represented. We might already have it represented at least a little bit in the modeling already, but I think to answer your 2 questions, one, no new modeling right now in terms of capacity expansion modeling to see those trade-offs. But to answer the second one, there might be a way to look at the duration or the scale of the need and see if that's something that storage might be a good fit for. But I'm not 100% sure we'll be able to do that in this cycle.
I'm sorry, I was muted. What is your thinking of the timing of this study that you're proposing with the consultant do?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the way I'm seeing the timeline right now is we're going to have this discussion today, see what folks are thinking about, you know, potential areas of bulk need. Maybe give another week for folks to marinate on what we're talking about today and get all comments in. We'll review those comments and let you all know what bulk areas we're going to have the consultant evaluate. And that'll probably take a month or two. You know, it'll probably be Q2, late Q2 by the time we get full results back there. But then we'll have another EPPAC meeting sometime at the end of Q2 to share those results about, you know, what the scope looks like for like a bulk solution and kind of what that information looks like.
But again, it's Liz, Bill, you know, partly driving the time frame is that we want the commission to have this information with the results of the process. So everything has to come together.
Makes sense, Liz. Thanks.
I think Chris had something.
Yes. Thanks, Liz. Just a couple of thoughts. I think it's fine to look at the additional bulk transmission need to Zone J. I tend to agree with Bill in that I still think as you look at the generation needs to tie with the transmission needs, both long-term duration storage and some type of defer are necessary in order to meet year-round needs. And then the last thing that I think is important to consider would be some of the delays that we've seen and how much more delay we will see, coupled with, even if you do add bulk additional bulk transmission, what's the timing of that? Is it actually more like a 10-year cycle versus even thinking about it in a 5-year period? So those are just some considerations.
Those are great points. Yeah, the types of solutions we're scoping out, there is definitely a big question mark on delivery dates. You know, if we think we are seeing, you know, information in the model that says, say 2035, these bulk solutions are really high value, maybe more high value than only focusing on local. We then have that consideration of how feasible is that time frame? You know, what are the supply chain issues, workforce issues, permitting issues, all those types of things, to try to, you know, make sure if we go that route, we're confident that the solutions we're looking at will be available when they're actually needed. I think that's an issue for some of the local projects as well. I think somebody already mentioned transformers, and that's been just a monster in a lot of the project prioritizations that we've been seeing. You know, transformers have been a really difficult thing to get your hands on, and so timing is definitely a good consideration to make sure we're thinking about. I do see one question in the chat as well about renewable resource availability and whether or not we're taking a probabilistic approach to the modeling, say, of wind like wind resource or solar outages, those types of things. What I can say about that is the capacity expansion model has some variability built into it for the day-to-day operation of, say, solar or wind generation profiles, and that's what drives the model to solve on how much solar is needed then, how much wind is needed then, how much storage. But there isn't an additional layer of probability built in there to say, what if in this 1 week there was no wind, or what if in this 1 week there solar all went out, for example. We haven't tested extreme events. We're basically building a kind of a blue sky system almost in the capacity expansion model, with the one caveat being that we do incorporate both capacity ELCC values for various resources to take account for their variability in the models accounting for their value, and also a reserve margin and local capacity requirements to show like how much additional resources are likely needed in certain areas, to under that probabilistic assessment that's done outside the model, to make sure we do have enough resources. So we're trying to account for those things without having done some form of stochastic simulation inside of the model. Did I answer your question? Oh, awesome, thanks. Okay, Radhika.
Hey, thank you, Skylar, for the discussion. I have a question on on this the additional bulk needs into J. Are you I forgot if clean path is included in the base case or not. So a question is on that, and then do you have like in mind an order of magnitude of like the bulk needs you are looking at, potentially looking at, like how much, how many gigawatts or megawatts into
Yeah.
zone J? Do you have already a sense of the magnitude that you are thinking to look at?
Oh, okay, yeah. I think it's more than 1 and less than 20 gigawatts, probably. There's a little bit of like detail given in a couple of the sensitivities to show what we're relying on from an ELCC perspective. And it's really significant. The combination of wind, solar, storage, and defers downstate is always based on the LCR. It's coming out with a ELCC contribution of 10 to 15,000 megawatts. So as we had that discussion with Anna just a second ago, we're probably not going to, go for bulk solutions assuming we get literally nothing in New York City. So we're probably not going to go to the 15 or 20, but we don't want to ignore it, because there is already some foreseeable risk from all 3 of those solutions showing up on the time frames we had in the original modeling, right? Offshore wind, hydrogen defers, energy storage in the 10 to 15,000 megawatt range. All those things have some amount of risk, and so we want to evaluate some significant amount of capacity that can make a measurable difference in that risk. But it's very unlikely to be feasible to try to replace all of that, obviously, with just transmission from external areas. And so I don't have that number. I don't even know what number is feasible, and so that's kind of why I was talking through at the beginning. Is one of the assessments might be an assessment of the assessment of like figuring out what even is the expandable capability of the existing network, and what are the opportunities for maybe doing like not just expansion but actually new build transmission lines into New York City. What's the capability to do something like that at scale, just to see what we're working with in terms of a maximum magnitude, so we can kind of pick the best ones, or the lowest hanging fruit or the nearest term ones, and do a lot more digging on those.
Thank you. And is clean line assumed? Like,
Oh, sorry.
what is the latest assumption on the clean line?
So in the original
clean
state
path,
scenario,
sorry.
yeah, it was in the original state scenario. We were able to, at the very last second, when that notice came in, we were basically done with stage 1, but we were able to run a sensitivity off the state scenario, removing that. And so we do have those results as well that the utilities can reference when they're building their their information in their forecasts and in the stage 2 through 4 work. But in all the scenarios that and the sensitivities that were presented, other than that sensitivity 10, it is in the model. So all those results that you're seeing are results that assume an additional, power line into New York City.
Okay, so those bulk needs that you are seeing beyond clean paths. That's, I think, what I hear.
Right. So the discussion I was having earlier on sensitivity 7, which was kind of assessing the risk of like no defers in downstate New York, even with clean path in there, removing the defers, you needed to actually put more than 1-to-1 capacity back in the model. So we lost like 6,300 megawatts of defers, but we lost 7,200 megawatts worth of load. And that was because the defers were running in the morning to charge storage. And that storage plus all the defers was running at peak. And so that kind of leads the overall need, even with clean path in there at, over 7,000 megawatts, if hydrogen doesn't show up at all. Maybe there are other, firm fuel sources that come in to replace some of that if that hydrogen risk pans out, but we don't know. But that was what I was referring to, and so those needs were there even with clean path involved. And in a lot of the other sensitivities and scenarios, we were seeing build outs of 10 to 15,000 megawatts of batteries in New York City, which is that's pushing the line of feasibility there as well. So if there's some delivery risk on the megawatts of storage we can get, and we've already gone basically as far as we can go with, say, hydrogen offshore wind, there's risk there as well. So we're trying to figure out how big is that risk just by evaluating the various scenarios, and then maybe scope out a few options there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that?
Skylar, it's Liz, you see there's a question in the chat. Was that answered?
I think I am seeing one, but I think that is the one we were
Yeah.
able to get to.
Right, okay. Gotcha.
And Skylar, are there other areas that you are looking at, or is this everything you had for bulk?
That was the primary thing in my mind right now before coming to you all and starting a big brainstorming session in this meeting in the next week. So happy to have launch into any other conversations, any other proposals right now too. The only other thing that had popped into my mind was something that came up in a previous EPPAC meeting about, and it might have been you actually, Radhika, about the zones, the large areas, especially in upstate and western New York, where there might be 10 plus thousand megawatts of given resources in a small like few counties. It might make sense to build bulk transmission to those areas as opposed to 10 or 15 different local transmission solutions. Maybe there's a backbone concept there to evaluate, but we haven't done as much thinking on that yet.
Yes, and if we can discuss this in more details today, that would be awesome. I see Ali has, or Shada has a hand raised, so I don't know how you want to proceed to discuss this piece now or later, but I think that would, yes, indeed, that is something that AC New York believes strongly in evaluating as a bulk need, given the magnitude of generation additions and also like the incremental headroom was shown to increase materially, required to increase materially, and there could be opportunities there to look at bulk or hybrids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly, I think, the thinking. We saw those same results that you're referencing, where by 2040 we're seeing 15, maybe 20,000 megawatts of headroom, like local headroom, being added just to keep building energy, like what the model sees as low cost energy in the same zone. Maybe some of that had to do with the fact that the model did not have, the ability to increase the bulk transmission capability in the model to maybe build other resources. Maybe it's just, the fact of New York. We just have renewable resources where we have them, and those are the ones we have to build because load is so high. I'm not exactly sure which one that is. That's something we can look into, but either way, in every scenario, we did see, really, really significant build outs in a couple areas of the state. And I could definitely see scoping something there just to see if there is a way to build kind of a bulk transmission backbone that mitigates a lot of that need for local transmission. I think that might end up, resting on the interconnection voltages of those resources. If a lot of them are going to be on the lower voltages and you're going to have to reinforce that system anyway, that might limit the value of also adding a high voltage backbone, and we have to see if the high voltage system is being strained in those areas. But that's definitely something to look into.
And I think a couple of areas that you had in mind are generally aligned in the PPTN proceedings as well, where some of those areas, like with a name like Southern Tier, North Country, like they keep coming back as like bulk needs for stakeholder, and even New York ISO acknowledging the need to monitor transmission expansion in those areas. So it will be helpful, and if you need feedback on what specific areas we can provide in
Yes,
writing.
that would be great. Now on the phone or specifically in writing would be even more helpful, I think, as we scope, specific work for the consultant to do, because we're going to need, somebody is going to need to tell the consultant exactly what to be looking into, and the more specific we can get, the more detail we can get from you all, the better. Thank you. Shadab, go ahead, then we can circle back to anything else we need to talk to over there.
Hey, thanks, Skylar. I have a couple of suggestions and maybe a question. So first of all, I appreciate, Skylar, that understanding the storage concern in zone J and K, and we need to understand the bulk solution requirement for that, right? What I was going to say is zone J and K are absolutely serious when it comes to storage. We have shared that analysis with you, that how, if a storage is charged after 4 hours, it could be a problem, especially if we charge storage in the light load. The light load will become actually more than the summer peak or winter peak. That is a serious problem. What I was going to suggest is be consistent with your modeling approach in the model. I would say storage concern is same regardless of where you are, right? Whether zone J, K, or any zone. So I think it's important to be consistent with our modeling approach. And my second question is that once your consultant performs the analysis, bulk transfer, and you identify the need, what will be the next step in terms of bulk solution? How do you see that panning out?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of flexibility there, and it's all going to be dependent on our confidence in the results that we're seeing. So the steps right now are identifying, what we've seen from the model to see if there's something we need to look at. I think we already know there's at least 1 or 2 areas we want to look at. We have the consultant do that work, and they provide us with details about what it would mean, what that type of design would look like, maybe even some cost information for expanding those areas by, a certain amount. And once we have that information, if we feel really good and really confident about all that type of stuff, we have the ability to move forward right away with identifying needs through something like a PPTN process. But we also have the CGPP process already built up to accept more of that information into stage 5, do that kind of co-evaluation of bulk versus local needs in additional capacity expansion modeling in stage 5. And once we see more information on that, if we want more information out of that, we can proceed by putting that whole portfolio of projects together in the final report, in the joint utilities final report that goes to the commission. And so there's a lot of pathways, it could be, as soon as we get information, it could be, while we're evaluating the portfolio approach, it could be after, during the report. So there's a lot of ways we could move this forward.
Yeah, appreciate that. I guess my only concern is that how do you make sure, how do you actually separate the local problem and the bulk problem? And then you could have a one bulk solution actually that could solve your bulk need as well as address need for local upgrade, right? I struggle to understand how do we separate those two things together. Uh, Without, I think the better approach perhaps would be to have to basically identify all the reliability need, and then let the stakeholders develop comprehensive solution. It could be a bulk solution or bulk solution plus local upgrade. But I think without doing that, it's hard for me to understand like, how do you do it? You can identify, especially when you have this type of problem with so much storage, and you will see, if you model a big line, it could address multiple needs. What are your thoughts on that? How are you going to do it?
Yeah, I think we're caught in a slightly suboptimal world right now where we did not have a modeling framework that was capable of co-optimizing, bulk expansion with, local headroom increases or representing the local transmission system. So what we're doing right now is kind of this piecemeal approach where we have, some initial modeling that might point to, certain generation build outs and some local needs, but simultaneously we can recognize just through our expert analysis and working with our expert stakeholders, identifying where we think bulk might actually be more valuable. That's what we're doing today, and we're going to evaluate what that looks like with the consultant. And then we have the ability in stage 5 to compare those assets, the bulk versus the local, and see what it looks like, and see if the bulk solutions do mitigate some of the needs that we see being solved on the local side. So we have that ability to kind of compare and contrast those two worlds as we move forward in stage 5, and then kind of mix them together and see if there's hybrid approaches that might work best. But it is going to be more of a kind of guess and check than a co-optimization. So I totally get your point. Like in an ideal world, we would have an infinite number of scenarios and all the information to everyone all the time, and anybody could run the co-optimization and try to find the best hybrid approach to every project. We're not quite there yet this time. We want to improve the modeling process in cycle 2 of the CGBP to maybe incorporate that type of bulk expansion in the original stage 1 modeling, but we don't have that here. So we're just going to move forward with the current process, which is to do this type of separate bulk analysis, and then use stage 5 to compare, like you were mentioning, the values of bulk versus the local, and see if it mitigates some of those issues.
Yeah, I don't think, Skylar, we need infinite scenario or cases. To be honest, like how New York ISO done the PPTN process, if you pick one of the couple of scenario and put the right assumptions, run the analysis, identify all the thermal transfer voltage problem, and basically then let stakeholder come up with the solution. And I think that way you will get a comprehensive set from everyone, and then I think, of course, local upgrade, the system upgrade, but I think then perhaps, then bulk upgrade could go to the RFP, right? I think that's where I got disconnected. Like, how do you do it? The ideal process would be actually similar to CPC, that New York ISP put in process where essentially you put all the need in the window and let the developer develop solution. I think that would be the ideal process.
Yeah, that might be an improvement. My concern is that we don't have that modeling. We don't have, a comprehensive analysis of the bulk interfaces from production cost modeling or capacity expansion modeling that shows any, thermal or voltage issues. All we have is capacity expansion modeling at the moment and the local assessments that the utilities are producing. And so we don't have that type of information at the moment to provide with stakeholders. I think at our best approach now is to try to use the information we do have to identify solutions that we might want to evaluate and develop, and kind of do that through this analytical process, and then get feedback on those to see if they produce the types of outcomes we're looking for. And then we can proceed, at that point, once we are confident with maybe a handful of projects or one or more projects that is providing value beyond any of the local solutions that we're seeing. At that point, we can initiate the process that you're talking about, where we might identify a PPTN and then it goes through that nice little process you were describing.
Yeah, I think there is still disconnect. I'm sorry, but I think regarding your modeling question, I think we are now at a point from your production cost, all the work we have done so far. Now we have all the resources information where we need to model resources and the load. I think we should go to the next step, basically put them in the reliability model, perform the analysis and identify the reliability need, and then let the developer propose solution. I think that will be the right approach. Because my concern with the current approach is if you put local upgrade without understanding the bulk solution, and I don't know like how that process will even work. Like how do we even propose a bulk solution, right? Like if we share our idea with you guys, then that's not I think that's not secret anymore, right? I think then how do we propose that, let's say, through the competitive process, right? So I'm trying to understand like how do we even share our ideas in this forum, before you open the window. So I think there's a disconnect there. Versus if if you like similar to the PPT in the process, if you put all the need and then that will allow developer to develop solution, and that way there's also confidentiality about the ideas.
Yeah, I don't think we're at that level right now, and that reliability assessments that you were mentioning, that isn't part of the CGPP right now. We don't have a reliability model, segment of the CGPP. We have the reliability. What am I trying to say? We have the kind of the statistical level analysis that's happening in the capacity expansion model. We have a representation of how we would measure reliability in a system, making sure we build out enough resources to meet those reliability criteria. Then the utilities and us are evaluating very publicly right here where we see potential local and bulk needs on the transmission system, evaluating those things and identifying where we think expansion of the existing network might make sense, and filing that with the commission. At that point, action can be taken. And if something falls out in bulk and we say, you know what, expanding upstate downstate transmission, we think makes sense. Let's try to evaluate, 1,000 megawatts of that. At that point, we go to the phase where developers can start proposing their top secret solutions to solve our problems. I just don't think we're there. We're not at that phase where we need to be divulging, secret transmission plans for optimal specific projects. I think what we're really trying to do now is identify, like Radha was saying, identify themes, identify areas of the state where the concept of expansion of bulk interfaces makes sense and might reduce cost of building a least cost system, or might solve some of our local needs. And we're brainstorming that to evaluate those types of solutions. And we're not quite advanced enough in this understanding to even identify those things that we would tell developers to propose back to us. So I don't think you're missing an opportunity. I don't think we're on a wrong path. I just think we're, a few exits early from where we're going to get to that point. Liz, did you want to say something on that?
No, I just wanted to underline or underscore, remind everybody the commission is going to use the inputs, including any concepts of potential bulk needs, to make some decisions. And one of those decisions will be whether or not there is a, transmission need that should be addressed through the ISO's competitive solicitation process. If that helps.
And I see a question in the chat before we get back to Radhika. There was a question about whether we captured any electrolyzer load in, I'm guessing, downstate New York, because it's references creating hydrogen from offshore wind. In the model, electrolyzers were only cited, I believe, in zones A through E, maybe. I think all electrolysis happened in upstate New York. So I guess the answer would be no. There was no electrolyzer load added to downstate New York. assuming, offshore wind charging electrolyzers and creating hydrogen or something. That was not part of the model. But there is electrolysis, quite a bit of it in the model in upstate. Go ahead, Radhika.
Thank you. I have maybe a question or a comment on what Shadab was saying on evaluating bulk. And so I think the way we are saying in bulk needs into zone J, it's a great example of how you are thinking about the concept, and it doesn't need to be, like maybe necessarily like developers, transmission developers submitting specific solutions and give away their secrets. So for a bulk into zone J, seems like I understand that concept. On the more like the zones with on upstate with high renewable potential or high incremental needs for headroom, there is this overlap, between bulk and local. And I think from prior discussions, there was an acknowledgement that the GUs in upstate New York will likely not look at high voltage solutions, unless I misremember the response. But that's one comment that was mentioned, that they will not be looking at high voltage. So when you consider bulk for those areas, again, like hybrid, it's a mix. So it will be hard to define bulk without knowing what those local constraints are. And I think that's where Shadab was going on, like the reliability needs. And the next stage will be stage 3, will be identifying constraints. So it's like if the consultant or like any party here with interest in submitting ideas for bulk solutions upstate New York, if we had the information on those constraints, or if we had the models, then you can be more informed about what bulk solution could address both like a interface transfer capacity, like increasing that, but also like if there are like several low voltage constraints connected to the high voltage, you may have a hybrid solution there, or may have a solution that can address some of the local needs as well. So it may not result in, as you are saying, just rebuilding or reconductoring the low voltage lines. But it comes back to knowing what those local constraints are, such that anyone looking at a bulk solution could look at, is there a way to avoid the local or like build that best solution? So the question to me is, what are your thoughts about like the information around local constraints? When will that be presented, shared? Will the models be shared, or will the consultant could also have this scoped in their assessment to look at those local constraints and the models and identify potential bulk solutions or hybrid solutions?
Yeah, I think this is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to thanks, Rodrigo. This was exactly my concern, Skylar. Like, without, once you have the reliability analysis, identify all the need. I think there has to have a strap where JU staff and the developers, they can put together, they can look at the need and develop a solution. I think you will be surprised that maybe a one bulk solution will identify the need for 20 upgrades. Because with the current approach, my concern is if we put local upgrades first, that will dilute the need for bulk solution. And after the fact, bulk solution may not look as cost effective and attractive as it will look if you just give us all the need and allow developer to develop a comprehensive solution to identify both bulk and local need, and there may be some left over that can still be addressed by the system upgrade. But I think that would be an ideal approach. That's what I want to mention here. Thanks.
So I think there's a couple things going on here. So first, we're not actually giving priority to local transmission needs. Anything the bulk consultant is looking into is starting from the results we got from the capacity expansion model. They're not going to be taking the system after the utilities have identified issues and resolved them through local constraints and seeing what else can be done there. It's a parallel process happening simultaneously. So that's the first thing. I don't think we're necessarily running that risk of, local solutions mitigating any value of bulk just because of the timing. But what also, to go along with that timing issue, is just the sequencing. We can't wait in this process for all of stage 4 to be completed before evaluating which of those local solutions we think might have been better or partially mitigated by bulk solutions. We just don't have time in this process. We really need to get this process moving and get to solutions to compare between the two. And since these all take 3 to 6 months each to complete, we really need both of those processes to be moving forward at the same time. So the process that we have in this cycle 1 of the CGPP is the utilities are running with their local system models, their power flow models and stability models to find out what issues they have and proposing local solutions to that. Simultaneously, we're looking at similar information, including maybe whatever siting that the utilities have done, but not looking at their full results because we're not going to have them. We're going to be looking at additional details from the capacity expansion model and the siting analysis to come up with bulk solutions that might also have high value. Those bulk solutions will be evaluated in stage 5 in comparison to model runs that look at the local solutions. So we can actually compare the model with the bulk solution in there versus the model with the local solutions in there to see how that actually works out. And then if we need to run additional analysis, which is not part of our scope right now, to try to examine explicitly the hybrid solutions as opposed to just concluding that hybrid solutions might be better. We may be able to run additional, but I don't want to commit to that. But right now in cycle 1, we are stuck in this situation of needing to do these kind of parallel processes and then use as much judgment as we can to compare those options together. This type of bulk solution versus these set of local solutions. Maybe there's a mix, and get to a conclusion there, hopefully by the end of the year or shortly after.
And how are you going to get the bulk solution?
I didn't understand the question. Could you say that again?
Sorry, how are you going to get the bulk solution? So especially from developers, the non-incumbent developers like us, if there is no competitive process, how are we going to share our ideas with you guys?
We're not seeking specific solutions. If the commission determines after all of these analyses and comparisons that it looks like there's a bulk need, just exactly as we do now currently under the NISO public policy process, if the commission says, yes, there's grounds here to believe that there's a bulk need, then we will turn to the ISO and we will ask the ISO to run solicitations for specific competitive solutions to the need identified through the study process.
Right. Thank you, Liz. And I think that's the fundamental disconnect here, is that this proxy level conceptual solution that we're thinking may exist as valuable based on the capacity expansion model results is something we want a consultant to poke at. We want them to, off of our hypothesis that upstate downstate transmission might be valuable. We want them to poke at that and see, what if we did an extra 1,000 megawatts? What would that look like? Where might it start? Where might it end? What are theoretical costs for those? Maybe we throw that in the capacity expansion model to see if we're right, that there was some value there. And the outcome of the process is the identification of a need, not the actual solution itself. So that's what I was saying earlier about timing, about that's not where we are yet. We're early in the process, just looking at proxies, looking at concepts to see if we do need to identify a need because there is totally a chance maybe that we look at upstate downstate transmission and we find out that it's not expandable, it's incredibly expensive, it's really hard to do, and we don't want to do it today, and then there isn't a need and we don't move forward. And so there is no producing there's no producing like developer information at this point at all. We're just, like Liz said, we're just looking into options to see whether there are needs and whether there is value, and at that point everybody will have a chance at the end to look into it, to propose whatever they want. But right now we're in this kind of effort, brainstorming proxy conceptual solutions development.
Yeah, maybe I'm not doing a good job in communicating my concerns, Skylar, but what I heard from you is in stage 5 or 4, you will compare you will have the local solution, and then you will compare the bulk solution and figure out which is the best. If bulk is the right solution, then it will go to stage 5 for a possible competitive RFP. I think in all of this, my concern is, without having the right ideas from the parties, how do you even make that determination? So, I mean, you may test few ideas, but that's your consultant ideas only. That doesn't mean those are the best ideas. I think versus if you share the full set of need with the developers, they could come up with a better approach. And I'm not saying that will be the best, but time will tell. But I think that will be an ideal approach to find the best solution, like what was done in the LIPA PPT and in the last New York offshore wind PPT.
Somebody,
yeah.
it's Liz, somebody asked a question about what are the metrics for doing this evaluation, and I want to give a high level, non-technical kind of response, which is it's not going to be a terribly robust comparison, because we're going to be comparing some pretty specific local solutions proposed by the JU with a conceptual response to a bulk need. So it's not going to be a sort of side-by-side comparison that you might do, if you had fully developed bulk solutions, to compare to equally developed local solutions. We're not going to be in a position to do that. It's going to be a much more kind of, how does this feel to us sort of analysis. But Skylar, you can be more specific.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, especially for the bulk side, we're not getting to stage 5, looking at them together and then buying something. We're looking at them together and evaluating which pathway looks the most reasonable and has the most benefit to both renewable generation build out and ratepayer cost, in terms of keeping ourselves on the pathway towards a zero carbon system. And at that point, we can make decisions on whether or not to move forward with a more detailed evaluation or an RFP or whatever next step we want to take on bulk solutions. So there's a lot more detail to come on that after this type of evaluation. We're just at the very beginning. And like Liz said, the metrics are really just whatever we can get from the comparison of capacity expansion runs. So far we've seen kind of the build mix, the headroom, the total needs in various areas of the state. We can analyze the cost of those resources against each other to see what we're looking at. But that's kind of it. We're not going to have some fully engineered solution of every scenario to compare at this point.
Hi, this is Raya. I've had my hand up.
Yeah, we have Chris. I know that last discussion went pretty long, but Chris was in the queue, and then you're next, Raya, and then Radhika.
Okay.
Go ahead, Raya, and then I'll go after you.
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Raya.
I'm listening, and I feel like you've explained your answer to these questions a couple of times, but what you haven't, I think, answered, which I've heard several stakeholders ask for, and I have the same ask, I think, in the situation, is to share information, so that, because I don't think, I know certainly we wouldn't be doing some full analysis either, but I think stakeholders, certainly including ourselves, would like to be able to have access to information so that we can do those same hooks and be able to contribute more substantively to the process at this stage.
Yeah, I have heard that request. and the data that has been requested, we've been able to share to this point everything that we're allowed and able to share. The next level of data that would allow, say, an EPPAC member or an additional consultant to run the same analysis to kind of double check the utilities work or double check our work, that level of the power flow model detail or utility distribution model detail is not something that's going to be able to be made public. We can show the inputs and we can show the results, but there's not going to be a handoff of, say, the utilities models themselves that are used to show, the power flow models themselves that result in, issues that cause solutions to be developed. That the model itself is not going to be turned over to stakeholders, but if there's specific data sets that are part of that might be kind of an input to that modeling, then if that specific data is requested, we can see if that specific data is protected or if that's something we can share. But I think maybe someone from the utilities could speak up about what level of detail has been shared and if that's pretty much as far as we're going to be able to go, or if there's other stuff that might be available at this point.
This is Chris Schramm from RG&E. Yeah, so we've provided the capacity expansion build out and also the specific generation placement locations. One of the outputs that could come out of stage 3, as we discussed, is actually moving those generators to better locations away from local areas that are pretty constrained. And I just don't know if we would share, specific CEII type, contingencies and overloads and things like that. I suspect that someone that's enterprising could look at the data we've sent and provide it already from stage 1 and stage 2 and produce their own similar cases, in theory, but I don't think we it would be okay for us to share, our specific build out and our specific models.
All right. Well, thank you. That's extremely helpful. And I won't speak for any other stakeholder in terms of, we might need to take things back to figure out exactly what data we'd be interested in having, and what level of aggregation could be helpful, and if we could or should engage in a confidential information process amongst the EPPAC, if that is something that we could do as we do in other other dockets where we share confidential information at some level. I hear you on the certain things, but that could potentially be a solution. We certainly do that routinely.
Yeah, that's true. Well, how about we ask the utilities to think about that and see what the data sets look like, and see, kind of put into 2 buckets, like what is something that's potentially available, maybe able to be shared, and what is kind of the threshold where this is probably not going to be shared even under confidentiality protections. And maybe we can bring that back to a future EPPAC meeting. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
All right, thank you. And this is strictly conceptual because you asked the question about the bulk power system. And in my mind, I'm trying to combine a couple of different things of the expected large load growth and kind of where it will show up in New York State, and a lot of it will be in upstate, coupled with there's going to be a need for some type of DFERS as we go forward to supplement and be complementary to intermittent load. And so just a couple of thoughts would be, as you think about bulk power and building out, a number of those large loads will likely want to be at or near an existing generator because of their power needs. So maybe looking at the bulk power build out near existing sites could have some value. Those sites also could be transition sites to newer, either low or no carbon technology. And as a result, you may get to a bit of a lower cost outcome because you're utilizing existing, you're upgrading bulk in areas where that new source will be. And then those sites could be home to long duration storage, hydrogen, whatever technology, whether it's small modular reactors or whatever. So that would be a thought. And then the one other item that I would put out would be, I think you mentioned zones A through E. You might expand that a bit to maybe pick up like A through G, because some of those existing sites might be within those zone areas.
Okay. Going back to your first point, Chris, you were mentioning a couple things there about, evaluating bulk transmission that could alleviate, the strain from large loads in very condensed areas. But then you also mentioned, I think it was like scenario 5 that has now been promoted to one of the 3 scenarios that had, this alternate, high capacity, low operating cost defer. Were you saying to like build bulk transmission to those sites or to co-locate like generation resources with the large loads?
Yeah, I think you could be in a situation where you're expanding. For example, I'm just going to put it out like a nuclear site. You may have a license renewal coupled with a small modular reactor. So you're actually adding capacity to a specific site that will need potentially additional bulk power support to move that energy around.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those type scenarios, or you have an existing gas site that you're converting to a large long duration storage site. All right. Again, potentially you might need additional bulk capability to move it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely some interesting concepts there. Yeah.
I think Radhika was next.
Thank you. I think I will take us back to the prior discussion on that concept of bulk versus local or hybrids. And so again, it's like you want to show a bulk concept. However, like if we take the example of like a process such as like once the constraints are identified by each GU, then by each utility, then that information is shared with all of us and also shared with the consultant, or maybe the consultant also gets the models via your own process. If you are not sharing it with stakeholders, at least the consultant should have those models or could have those models. And to the extent that there are local areas with multiple lines overloaded or near high voltage system, a bulk solution could make sense. And then the portion for local could be reduced by having this bulk or the hybrid concept. So I do want to ask again the question, are you envisioning one to share the constraint analysis, the constraint information once that's done before the end of the stage 3? And 2, why would the consultant not look at this data as well? Not only the capacity expansion modeling, but also the information from the reliability analysis. Because
taking
that
the last
bulk,
one. Yeah.
and I'm like thinking also, like you mentioned, well, we'll compare this conceptually, well, it makes sense, but from a local standpoint, will you be presenting information such as like, this local really needs to happen because it's also aging infrastructure reliability. So let's say this bucket, let's put some numbers like $2 billion or whatever numbers, like this bucket really needs to happen anyway if you don't have bulk. Even if you don't have bulk, then there might be another bucket that will be maybe it could be addressed with bulk, maybe not. And I think this is the evaluation that seems like is not going to happen unless you are bringing in this valuation. And then there might be local that you could compare with bulk, but those, at least the middle bucket, that there can be a lot of opportunities there for bulk. But if you look at bulk only from the standpoint of capacity expansion modeling, you are like removing some benefits for that bulk solution. Yeah, so those.
We're hoping the consultant will be able to do the analysis with whatever information is available to them at the time. I think I mentioned this earlier about the timing consideration. We can't necessarily wait until the end of stage 3 or the end of stage 4 when we have, you know, every bit of information and then pick up and start doing a bulk analysis. That just, it would not be feasible, and it would push us out to like middle to late next year before we get a final report in. And we're already behind schedule. So we're trying to move forward quickly and try to get a solution that's kind of does all the things that we're going to be able to do really anyway, because we just don't have the capability to co-optimize everything. It's just not going to be something that happens in cycle 1 of the CGPP. So what we're trying to do is, you know, use the information, like I mentioned before, with the capacity expansion model, the siting analysis that the utilities have done, maybe any preliminary indications that they have about areas of concern that they're looking at, and develop bulk solutions in the areas that we think are important, utilizing that information and see if there's a likelihood, and this is up to all of us and up to you, when we bring that information back and it looks like the bulk solutions or the bulk proxies that have been developed look like they may be impacting or eliminating some local needs, that's something for all of us to review and evaluate, and do additional analysis if we need to, because we don't want to invest in two things to solve the same problem, but we also don't want to miss some really urgent problems, especially things that might have to do with asset condition or reliability. And so we're going to use whatever information we have available, but we cannot wait months and months longer before we even start this process, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand we cannot wait until the end. And we, like, my point is not to wait until end of stage 3. It's like when the information on constraints, like what constraints are seen areas of concern, are you saying that this information will be shared with EPPAC, the consultant, as soon as it's available, which could be, I don't know if it's already available or it might be available in 1 or 2 months, or like, I don't know what the update is, but to be able to develop and finalize solutions, you need to have the constraints. So that would be, you know, like earlier in the stage.
Well, the constraints are developed at the end of like finding the, you know, the results of the stage 3 modeling, and we don't have those yet. I don't know exactly when the end date of that is going to be. We don't have that yet. So we could always, you know, come back at the end. I think what we had committed to, since, you know, the original order didn't say anything about anything but basically stage 1 and stage 5, we kind of acknowledged that, you know, it's probably more interesting and will give us better feedback if we incorporate EPPAC even beyond that. And so we kind of rewrote that that concept of integration with EPPAC to also include feedback at the end of stage 3 and stage 4. But I don't know if we're going to be able to, you know, have an EPPAC meeting when we get the power flow results of, you know, scenario 1, have another one when you get the results of scenario 2. That's like interim information that, you know, we were not planning on just, you know, putting out there outside of releasing when we have a full batch of data at the end of stage 3. If any is available, we may be able to access that as, you know, DPS to maybe support additional modeling of the bulk solution, but I'm not committing to that because I don't have it right now, and we don't even know when that's going to be done. So all we're saying right now is that we have added EPPAC coordination at the end of stage 3, at the end of stage 4, during stage 5, and then the final report. But I don't think we're gonna move beyond that at this point. But we are hoping to get concepts right now, you know, through this meeting and in writing over the next week, of any ideas people have for like areas of the state that we might want to evaluate bulk solutions for.
Thank you. I'm I'm trying to understand like why we wouldn't like information around constraints is critical, no? Because that's like the solution that defines a lot of things going forward. So, and especially if those constraints are also like reevaluated after changes in mapping, both any revisions in mapping and kind of like should also be coming along, like releasing that as well, because I think there were some comments earlier about maybe moving the generation that was mapped to areas with less congestion. But if those generators are in the queue, like why would you move them if that's like what is likely to happen from a development standpoint?
So I think the constraints you're referring to are the constraints that the utilities will find on the local system when they're doing the analysis. There's no additional analysis happening right now that's going to inform the bulk analysis that's going to like show red flags on the bulk system for constraints. We have all the data we're going to have on that, unfortunately.
I think this is the disconnect, because I think many of us are saying that you could have bulk solutions in an area with local constraints, and we are not saying
I
the
totally
bulk
agree with that.
solution.
I totally agree with that.
We agree with that.
Yes. Very true.
Okay. So the next step wouldn't be to either the consultant to access those models or for this information to be available to the consultant and to the EPPAC on constraints, such that, you know, any review of bulk in isolation or bulk in the concept of hybrid with local or replacement of local could be done even like outside of like a specific both bulk and local evaluation in the same models. At least kind of like having that information can help maybe help the consultant, especially if this consultant has experience with transmission planning. They could like, based on the topology, based on the local constraints, maybe there is a way to design a bulk that could potentially address both local and provide bulk benefits from capacity expansion modeling.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we're also agreeing with that. Like that's absolutely true. The only thing, the reason we're not committing to this is because we don't know the timing of the availability of this. We do know the timing of completing the bulk analysis and when it has to start and when it has to end. And we're not certain, and I'm fairly certain we're not going to be able to wait until we have that amount of information for them. We're going to have it, you know, after the fact at the very least, so we can see whether or not there's, you know, some overlap of those things. But we can't commit right now based on the timing overlaps to saying yes, the consultant in all of their analysis will have the utilities full assessment of constraints in hand when doing their analysis, because I just don't know if the timing is going to line up. I wish we have that, like we had all the results of stage 3 for the whole participation of the consultant in developing these proxy bulk solutions. I just don't think we can guarantee that right now. But if we do have it, then we will be using it. If that makes sense.
If stage 3 is to complete, I think it's by October, no? So to be complete, that means both constraints and solutions. So you should have constraints information in the next 3 months, no? Like maybe the utilities the GUs can provide an update on their side, but maybe there is an opportunity for I assume you'll include this in the scope, even if I understand you cannot commit that this will be included, but this will be evaluated. And as you said, 100%. But it'll be, I guess I appreciate if you can confirm that you will be including this in the scope subject to the constraints that you may have on. But I think practically speaking, the constraints analysis should be done in the next few months.
Right, and we also need to be simultaneously kicking this off and initiating the bulk analysis. And since the evaluation of constraints to begin the designing of solution is kind of a gating factor to even begin the analysis, I don't think we can wait for 2 or 3 months to even start the assessment. That's kind of what I'm saying. It's like maybe we have a scenario or two that incorporates that, but at the very least we will have work that's been done by the consultant doing bulk proxies that can then be compared to, the local solutions. It's not, this isn't perfect. Timing has not worked out for us the way we were hoping in all these cycles of CGPP. There's some ways to maybe accelerate at the end, but at this weird stage that we're in right now of needing to, because of the timing of this, need to launch these things off. I'm not sure we're going to have perfect alignment in, the optimal amount of data that we want to run all these processes, unfortunately. But I think we can, like I said before to Raya, I think we can, ask the utilities to go through that data and see like when are they going to have it, what amount of that data is probably acceptable to be shared publicly, when can that be shared publicly, and that type of stuff.
And this part of at least integrating, or like, yeah, at least having the opportunity to review the constraint piece to see if any bulk solution could be enhanced or could be, could be enhanced. It doesn't need to happen from day one. It could happen, after 3 months from now, where you start with something high level, but then to the extent that there is this information on constraints, maybe there is some refinement that can be done to, to support or yeah.
I totally agree with that, and the fact that we're bringing all of the information from both of those things, both the stage 3 work and the bulk solutions work, back to the EPPAC for this discussion before it even goes into the comparison time frame. So we get like at least 2 more bites at the apple of, reviewing this bulk versus local consideration. One when we're developing it now, one when we're looking at the local constraints and whatever bulk comes out, one when we're comparing them in stage 5, another one when we list the final portfolio of solutions in the report. And then if anything comes out of bulk, then there's another time period where people can actually propose solutions and design things. So there's like 4 or 5 steps remaining in this process where we can kind of prioritize these things and optimize what the bulk solutions actually look like. So I think I'm hearing a lot of this kind of, stress, which I feel as well. Like this is definitely not this is not the optimal way to design bulk solutions. We're fully believe that we recognize the multiple steps we could take in future cycles to try to improve how this coordination works. We're just trying to make sure everybody knows exactly how we're doing it this time and why we have to do it this way, and recognizing that we do have multiple gates that we're still going to have to go through and bring it all back to you all in multiple phases here.
I was just going to add, and thanks for mentioning, there are multiple opportunities, including, the public comment process after the needs and proposals get published. But in terms of, we know we have to make some modifications for the next cycle, and we are also hoping that the NISO, through their compliance filing for Order 1920, can help us solve some of these problems as far as the bulk system goes. Are there new Raya, is your hand newly up?
Yes. I guess I just wanted to weigh in that it's not really it's not helpful to, the earlier piece or the importance and the impact. So sort of like, oops, and like, we're going to figure this out down the road. Although we do need to figure out things down the road, I think it's not, it's important, but it's not necessarily helpful in the in the present moment. I just want to say that I understand exigency needs to keep us moving, but when we're talking about a month or maybe 2, and maybe the process is going to keep on moving the way it is, but what I think we've seen happen in this process is that when things when we get ahead of our skis, it causes a greater delay because stakeholders need to be extending the analogy, need to be in the lift, in order to have a meaningful impact. So, and then we've seen that happen where exigency ends up, we end up having to put the brakes on and go back and we lose more time. So I guess I'm asking that if we can figure out what the balance is so that folks feel like the right input is in at the most critical time, and we're able to substantively comment. And so, you know, I mean, that's a statement, but it's also, I guess, a request to, you know, so yes, I mean, maybe it's that, you know, as some of these analyses come in, you know, we are informed. And if we want to have an additional EPPAC meeting, maybe we can consider that. Or if we need to have, you know, some offline discussions, we consider those too. So check.
Yep, definitely open to those conversations for sure. And I think it's important to note that we did have the comment period. Also, you know, the staff white paper last year and the comment period about potential updates to the CGBP, and we did get a number of EPPAC members and others providing very useful comments and suggestions on how to improve this exact issue in future phases and future cycles of the CGBP, and we're taking all of those into account in trying to craft like a new way of doing these things. So hopefully we can, you know, draft those and improve this improve this part of the process in future cycles. I think I see Bill's hand is on the next on my list.
Thanks, Skylar. And actually, you great lead into my comment, which is about future cycles. You know, I think we've learned a lot in this first cycle, and we certainly are appreciating the fact that the timeline of the first cycle has forced us to do a few things suboptimally, but in order to hold the timelines. And you know, I think we've identified the fact that the capacity expansion modeling being a 24-hour snapshot was suboptimal, and we'd really love to have a better capacity expansion model. We've talked a little bit today about you know, the idea of looking at bulk solutions separately from other solutions and not really integrating the analysis together in those pieces. I think we're all recognizing that you know, we could do a lot more in the modeling arena. And I think we've also made the argument before in this meeting that you know, at the levels that we're going to be investing in the future in T&D assets in the state, that you know, it makes sense to invest in those in that better modeling going forward in the next round. My concern is that you know, we're working so hard to get this to do as best job as we can in round one, that we may get to the point where we're ready to go into round two and we're not ready to do that better modeling. And so my question for you and Liz is that I think it would be quite valuable if you could look at engaging a consultant or consultants plural to do a study for New York State on how we should do this modeling in round two. You know, taking into account all of these input you've gotten so far, to be able to be ready for round two as we go forward. Sorry, I get a phone call coming in here. But that's my my request, and something hopefully for feedback for you to take back.
That's a really interesting concept, Bill, because I know we did kind of put some of this concept out there in the staff white paper. We got some comments on it. There, you know, it was one of the like more detailed proposals that only got a few comments, and most of them were kind of like, you know, remaining and doing the similar thing with the ISOs modeling is fine. But you know, going into the nitty-gritty details about long duration storage and some other things, it might be interesting to have a consultant's view or some third-party view of, you know, what is the best way to get all of these things done all together. And that might enhance the CGBP. So we can take that back and talk about how we get to a solution about what modeling framework we use in the future. It's a good suggestion.
Good, thank you.
Is that everybody? So far?
That's all the hands. I was going to start a bit of a wrap up if folks didn't have any other questions at the moment. Go ahead, Shadab.
Yes, Kyle, I will try one last time. Appreciate all your patience. It's never too late to do the right thing. I understand you need to follow the current process. And actually, when this process was drafting, we gave comment, we shared our concern that how this will not work. And unfortunately, I'm seeing the same issue right now. With all due respect, I think there is a big gap in the current process. Really, it should have been like a 4-step process. Step 1 is your modeling assumptions. Step 2 is the analysis, identify need, and step 3 is opening the competitive RFP to get the best ideas. And then step 4 is just selecting the right solution. And I think here we're trying to develop these solutions in piecemeal approach. And I don't know if there's a transparent way even to see how do you make a decision whether the local solution versus bulk or a hybrid, which is the best solution. And I don't know if this will lead to the right outcome from this effort. With all due respect.
No,
I
you can
do
say
think
what you need to say. No, it's totally fine, and I understand. I think I agree that the 4 steps you mentioned are probably a good way to get an investable solution paid for, like selected and paid for. But that is not where we are in the process right now. We don't even know whether or not we are at step 1 in your 4-step process. We have a limited amount of data to go on right now. We think it's still, even with that limited amount of data, we have some indications of where additional bulk capability would be important or valuable, and we're going to examine whether or not it is valuable. If it is valuable, let's jump to your 4 steps. If it's not valuable, we didn't really lose anything. I also agree with you that the process we're following right now is not optimal. I think we've said that. I think we put that in our white paper, and we got a lot of great comments, and we're in the process of updating the CGBP as we speak to be compliant with 1920, to incorporate a few new modeling approaches, to change the way the bulks evaluation is done, a number of things. And so I think everybody on this call will appreciate that, and we'll have a lot better time in cycle 2 on this type of call next time. But I totally hear you. I know nobody's super happy with this process, but I think at the same time, it is not a failed process. This is not a missing piece in the process. We haven't even done it yet. So I would ask that folks keep an open mind and follow through this process. Keep giving comments, keep reviewing everything we're able to put out there, and giving us suggestions on what to do, because I think there is still a way. If we're focused, we pay attention to all the data, we compare everything to what's coming out of the local analysis, we do a good job in comparing things to stage 5, there is a way to manually, in this process, get our this current flow of data information to approximately the same place we would be if everything had been co-optimized from the beginning. So I think it's a little bit unusual. It's not optimal. It's kind of messy and might take a few more steps and require a lot more detail and attention, but it's not fundamentally broken, and it's not inherently wrong. I think there is just a process that could theoretically be better, that we hope to get to in future cycles, and we're not there yet, but we're going to keep moving forward because we think this is going to give us good enough information to invest in something that we think is important in the near term.
Thank you. I will just make a last request to share the information as you guys finalize the model, finalize your local solution. If you can post those files for us to review, we will appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's a reasonable request. And we were planning on sharing all the results of stage 3 in an EPPAC meeting when stage 3 is completed, but we're taking that back to see at what point those details will be available and what level of the detail we're able to release. I don't think any process that we've been a part of has ever released the full set of models or the full set of output files of a utility internal modeling process. But we might be able to get close enough that it's very valuable to everybody. So we'll try to see how far we can go there. Radhika?
I have a question with this, with the consultant scope of, will you, so I think you said that you are almost like ready to engage with the consultant. They will start working on some of those concepts, bulk into Zone J, and then maybe some of those upstate areas with some of the feedback that you got from this meeting. And then you'll come back to EPPAC for maybe data analysis, or what. I'm wondering from a timeline standpoint, and maybe this is something that can be looked at after the call, because I understand the points made before that it's not the perfect process, but I like what Shada said as well about maybe we can, like, how can we make it as right as possible within the limits that we have in this first cycle. And for instance, if a consultant will have some like high level ideas in like within the next 2 months, and then or like by June, and then they have the results of the constraint analysis or the models from GUs like June, July, like the 3 months could be enough for them to look at bulk solutions within the local, like bulk solutions, and whether some of those bulk solutions can help with the local constraints. With a consultant would, like if it's scoped this way, a consultant could spend 2 months looking into conceptual bulk solutions that could also alleviate some local, and whether like based on the local constraints, like where those bulk solutions could be more of an opportunity. So it's like, to me, if this information is provided within the next 2 to 3 months, a consultant would have time to look at solutions in a more detailed fashion and more integrated fashion, with this kind of like local assessment results as well.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that is a great concept. A great way to conceptualize the process here is like, as that information comes available, maybe the second or third bulk solution doesn't even need to wait. It's like the information comes at the perfect time to already incorporate some of it into that. Maybe the ones that have already been proceeded with can be refined using that new information. And if it's happening at a reasonable time, and we're able to continue working with the consultant, and it's not like cutting into additional time in stage 5 where we already need to kind of hand that information over in stages 4 and 5 to start comparing the two things. Yeah, like whatever information we have, we can definitely incorporate that in and keep revising.
And I know we are like time constraints, but maybe there can also be a situation where, let's say for one particular area, there is more time needed for refinements. Maybe there is an opportunity to still work in parallel before the final report, or some flexibility there, that if an area looks really promising, there can be some additional 1 month, or like a like couple of weeks or 4 weeks that could make a difference in evaluating something in more details.
Yep,
And
I think, yep.
I do want to say also, like, because we have the GUs, like AC New York is very appreciative of all the work that has been done by DPS staff, NYSERDA staff, by everyone, the GUs. So for me, everything that I'm saying is not like like fighting against each other. It's
No,
more
you don't have
like,
to apologize, Rod. No,
no, but I just want to like make everyone like feel like this is not a critique to anyone. Like local solutions, they are not like bad solutions. It's for us, AC New York is just looking at the system together and identifying, the cost-effective solutions for the system. And I think there was acknowledgement before that this is a common goal. So at the end, for AC New York, whether they are local solutions or bulk solutions, we want those solutions, but we also are cognizant that we don't have unlimited resources, including financial resources, for fixing everything and also the timelines, because it takes 10+ years, no, to get those projects. So it's not like fighting against each other. It's just like, what's the best process and how we can work through this in a constructive approach, and that makes everyone comfortable, I guess, or at least like you don't have those issues that Ryan was mentioning, that you may have more feedback, negative feedback at the end, delaying or not making everyone comfortable at the EPPAC level with the results. Thank you.
That is the whole purpose of this process, to make sure we are getting the best, most cost-effective, highest benefit mix of local and bulk resources, and so we want to make sure we're doing as best as we can in each cycle of the process. So we really appreciate all your comments. This has been extremely helpful, and this is obviously the first time we're doing this as well. So learning experience for everybody. John, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate. So regarding the consultant support, we do have some flexibility in scope, and the intent there is that we will, at appropriate points, working with DPS, ask the consultant to bring things back to EPPAC for feedback, both in terms of their observations as well as proxy solutions that they are considering. And the intent is to have them take into account the best information available to them at the time, and to, if we need to adjust that scope accordingly, we can do so within limits of kind of the timing that we're dealing with for this process. So just reiterating some of what Skylar said, but letting folks know as kind of working closely with those consultants that we have deliberately built in some flexibility as we're going through this process for the first time.
Thanks, John. All right. So I guess just to reiterate, we have gotten a ton of great feedback, tons of notes from today on process and how to kind of engage moving forward. Some suggestions on what we actually want to be doing in the analysis. I wanted to say again that we do have a week that we want to keep it open for folks to provide additional written feedback. If you were shy today, or if something else pops into your head and you want to share it with us, please send it to the EPPAC email address sometime in the next week by Friday afternoon. And then we're going to kind of scope that out. I'll send an email to everybody about where we're going with the bulk analysis. And then once we get the feedback from the consultant, we'll come back with that information to another EPPAC meeting sometime in the next couple months. And so that's kind of the process from here. And just let me know if you have any questions on that. Just feel free to reach out by phone, email, whatever, and we'll get those resolved. Also, I'm taking back some questions on data requests, trying to get a list of information that's going to be outputs from stage 3, and when those might be available. So we'll get back to folks on that as well.
Thanks, Skylar.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Oh, one more hand, Radhika.
Yes, I do have a question, and I know we sent late. We had some comments late Friday. We had some comments on the mapping, and I guess that I would just add that to your list if
Sure. Yep.
you can get back to us when we were suggesting a meeting at another EPPAC meeting on siting mapping, or like our comments, if they could be addressed in a provided response, would be appreciated.
Sure. Yeah, I had a chance to see those just before this meeting. I think my preference would be to review those and see if we can get some combination of utility folks to put together some responses to those, as opposed to scheduling a whole extra EPPAC meeting, because it does take quite a bit to put this stuff together, and get those feedback to you. And if on a next EPPAC meeting we need to raise some of those questions and just discuss them, we can do that as well. But I think my preference would be to start with some written responses, if that's okay.
Yep, that works. I appreciate the
Okay.
acknowledgement and plan for follow-up. And maybe reiterating one more time, I think every time we discuss like constraints, releasing needs, constraints on the system, it will also be helpful to have with that data the underlying mapping to the extent that the mapping is revised, because I think the two go together. So it will be helpful anytime we discuss releasing constraints information, that we have also that associated nodal mapping.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for the great discussion. We're going to close that for today, and we will expect an email from me shortly. And remember to reach out anytime in the next week with more ideas. And we'll see you in a handful of weeks for the next EPPAC meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.